There is nothing ugly about these unique creatures. The reason they live alone is because they're cannibals. Oh, well, it's hardly their fault. It's the way nature designed them. Noble, solitary, and prolific. Over 1,800 species worldwide, and in nearly all of them, the female is larger and more aggressive than the male.
As we've established in our previous discussions, Buffy the Vampire Slayer exists in the Twilight Zone between two periods, and the people who were born into the current period may not understand the logic of the previous period. Nowhere is this more prevalent than in Teacher's Pet, the episode we analyze today. Many reactors I've watched expressed sympathy towards Xander for being victimized so badly by the predatory teacher. Some even complain that the show doesn't do enough to emphasize how wrong the whole situation is. This is how the cyber period views the issue of female teachers seducing their underage students. In the rock and roll period, it was viewed very, very differently. Let's go back just 5 years, to 1992, to a Married with Children episode that was also titled Teacher's Pet. We focus on Bud, the teenage son of the Bundy family.
Except for you, Mr. Bundy.
What could this be? I hope she didn't notice me staring obsessively at her legs.
Mr. Bundy, I've noticed you during class staring obsessively at my legs.
Well, at least she didn't catch me looking at other things.
And other things.
Gulp.
Your behavior, Mr. Bundy, has finally forced me to take action.
I understand, Miss McGowan. Do what you must.
Yabba dabba doo.
Well, the crowd is going wild. Nobody seems to be shocked or think there's anything wrong here. On the contrary, it seems like something really awesome just happened. What was the matter with these people? Couldn't they tell that this is very, very wrong? When you try to understand a different period, the one thing you should refrain from doing is believe that you are morally superior to the people living in it. If they had customs that seem morally reprehensible to you, it is because their worldview, the paradigm of that period, led them to believe that these customs are morally right. So, let's try to reconstruct that period, and understand why they thought a teacher seducing one of her teenage pupils is cool. Let's make one thing clear right away. This was illegal, even back then. Why, then, is it shown in such a positive light? Well, first, let's remember where sexual taboos came from in Western culture. Traditionally, they came from the church. People were taught to refrain from certain sexual activities not because it was bad for them, but because it is sinful against God. To that, you can add taboos that had to do with patriarchal perceptions, with honor codes, with class codes, and with old cultural norms. In the 18th century, when the values of enlightenment took over, all these traditions started to recede, many people now regarding them as past traditions that are imposed on us, shackles we need to remove. The libertine, the one who flouted sexual taboos, became a cultural hero. With the early 20th century advent of psychoanalysis, which regarded the eros as the basic life drive, it became ideological. Psychoanalysis argued that the eros has to grow correctly through the different stages of a child's development in order for a person to have a healthy sexuality, and thus a healthy life. The repressive traditions were now seen as responsible for twisting the eros, and thus causing unnecessary misery. In the Hollywood period, it was common to believe that by seducing someone who was a sexual prude, you were liberating them from this repression, and thus allowing them to become healthier and happier. In cultural artifacts of the time, it is quite common to find the idea that women secretly wish to be raped, and thus sexually liberated. The rock and roll period brought with it a sexual revolution, and this kind of mindset now became dominant. The idea that women secretly want to be taken by force was no longer acceptable, but any other type of sexual misconduct was seen as liberating. One artifact in which we see it very clearly is the 1970 hit movie MASH. Pretty much all interactions the male heroes have with the female characters take the form of sexual harassment, to show that our heroes don't bow to the old repressive and twisted taboos. The women are shown to like it when men are such scoundrels. It is particularly blatant with the character of Major Houlihan, the head nurse in the military hospital, who is a major prude, and hence also a bitter woman who is always ruining everyone's fun. Our heroes sexually harass her in many ways, including giving her the nickname Hot Lips, until she finally breaks, comes out of her prudish shell, and becomes much nicer and happier as a result. This was the mindset of the time, especially among liberals. The rock and roll period also brought the rise of youth culture. In our previous discussions, we saw how the youth believed it had just a few short years to have fun before sinking into the boring routine of adulthood, so they had to cram as many experiences as possible into those years. It led to the belief that one should lose their virginity as soon as possible, and experience all possible sexual experiences in your teenage years before being trapped in married life. The rules were there to be broken, even if they were actual laws. A primary example is the 1978 movie Animal House, one of the youth rebellion blueprints of the rock and roll period. Every single sexual interaction in this film is legally rape, or at least molestation. Not just today, but back then as well. But the perception was that rape is only when you physically force sex on someone, and all other acts that are labeled rape are labeled so due to old prudery. The way the Animal House kids behave is portrayed as merely naughty behavior, an expression of their free spirits. None of the molested are shown to be victimized by it. The mindset of the rock and roll period convinced itself that sex is always good, and anyone saying otherwise is just stuck in old religious dogma. And, in this mindset, the best thing that could happen to you, as a teenager, is entering a sexual relationship with an adult who could liberate you by teaching you everything about sex. Boys actively sought it out, and many girls did too. It was illegal, but very few thought there's anything wrong with it. A relationship between a man and a girl was less acceptable, as males were seen as the active party, but between a woman and a boy wasn't perceived as harmful in any way. In fact, in the popular mind, the single most awesome thing that could happen to you in high school, as a boy, was becoming the boy toy of a hot teacher. As Bud Bundy finds out when it happens to him, suddenly, his hot classmate takes interest in him as well.
Yep. Two babes at once. God, I envy me.
Hey, did you guys hear the news? Miss McGowan's dating a student. She ran off with a football player.
Yeah, she said he was the only one that could ever satisfy her.
No big thing. That leaves me more time to give to the young babe.
Good news, babe. Now you got me all to yourself.
Drop dead. If you can't satisfy an older woman like Miss McGowan, what the hell would I want with you?
Well, let's just see how you feel when the new teacher gets here. I haven't seen the temp yet that didn't need a little lovin'.
I'm Mrs. A. Mariner, and I'll be the new teacher for the rest of the semester.
So, we see, it is common knowledge that the teacher ran away with a student, and it is told in a matter-of-fact way, not as something immoral and shocking. No one would intervene to stop it from happening. No one, except maybe your father.
You cradle robber! You share!
Maybe it can get worse.
I know what you want, Miss Gabor. You drive by and see that house and that Dodge and you say, some people live like this, why can't I? Well, you can't just take my son, have your way sexually with him, and not expect some repercussions from a concerned parent. I played high school football, I know the score. Son, are you really going out with this prune face? What strange hold do you have over the boy? How many happy homes have you broken in your 1,000 years? Sure, I know my boy is almost a virgin. But you can no longer take advantage. I have called the proper authorities. There she is, the strumpet with the blue hair. And I'll tell you something else. She lied about her age. Last time she saw 40 was 1840.
The whole thing, then, is turned into a big joke at the expense of Bud. He ends up being humiliated in every possible way, which is what always happens to the Bundys when they enjoy any kind of luck or success. There's no suggestion that he is in any way the victim here. But things were about to change. In the late 90s, the transitional phase to the cyber period, it started to sink in that sex isn't always good. After decades of sexual evolution, stories started to come out about the long-term damages that some sexual experiences could have on your mental health. A new sexual code started to emerge, one that isn't based on religious or patriarchal traditions, but on the knowledge accumulated during the sexual evolution. This code revolves mainly around the concept of consent between adults, and in this code, there are types of relationships that are designated as bad for you. Buffy's teacher's pet was the first cultural artifact, at least the first that I am aware of, that portrayed the female teacher as a predator, and her pet as a victim. Moreover, it doesn't just portray it as a bad thing, but as horror, something that can be horrific and traumatic to the teenage boy. Okay, not traumatic. Season 1 of Buffy still belongs to old TV, in which what happened in an episode stayed in that episode. There's no lingering trauma in this season. In fact, this episode even makes fun of the whole idea of trauma therapy. On the whole, the episode suffers from a lot of the problems of Season 1. It is a little bit cheesy, a little like a B-movie. Still, even the first season shows the creator's ability to string together several plot lines in a way that keeps you guessing, moves the plot forward in a convincing way, and weaves together several themes at once. This episode is widely considered to be one of the weakest of the whole show, but it is still masterfully crafted. Let's examine their craft. We start right away with our rock and roll moment. The cold opening is a daydream by Xander, who dreams of being the two things that a nerd can't be: a superhero and a guitar hero. Since they were considered the epitome of unsexy, nerds could never hope to get a girl as hot as Buffy. The superhero comics were there for them, to provide a fantasy world in which nerds were heroes. Xander dreams himself a cool vampire slayer, who saves a Buffy in distress and wins her heart. Then he treats the smitten blonde to a shredding guitar solo. In the rock and roll period, the phallic guitar became the symbol of your sexual prowess, as rock guitarists would prance and swagger around the stage, wielding their instruments around, to get the girls all hot and bothered. Unlike superheroes, rock guitarists were real-life heroes, the biggest heroes of the period, but nerds did not have it in them. All Xander can do, again, is fantasize about it, and he wakes up in class, drooling like an idiot. Xander then goes to the Bronze, where Superfine is performing on stage. Superfine is the first band we see that is an on-screen band. That is, not a genuine rock band, but formed specifically to appear on Buffy. There will be more such acts appearing in the Bronze as we go along. Xander, still under the impression of his daydream, hails the singer, who reacts with disgust that this nerd is talking to him, reminding Xander of his place in the high school social hierarchy. Xander then overhears his classmate Blaine bragging about his sexual conquests. They are 16-year-olds, and by that age you are supposed to be a regular player. Especially if you're a jock like Blaine, who is on the high school football team. Xander gets into a verbal duel with Blaine only to be mocked for his virginity, reminding him that in the rock and roll period, jocks ruled while nerds drooled. With his manliness thus trampled on a daily basis, Xander becomes easy prey for Miss French. Not just him, though. Teenage boys don't need their masculinity to be challenged in order to be constantly horny, and the super hot substitute teacher works her spell on every boy in the class. Once she gets them alone, she pulls the innocent little girl routine, and the young boys lack the sophistication to be able to resist it. Her first picks are Xander and Blaine, and it looks like Xander is headed towards the same fate as Bud Bundy, seduced by the teacher, but eventually losing her to the football player. He, however, is determined to show Blaine who the real man is.
Got a carve up for my one-on-one with Miss French today. When's yours? All right, tomorrow. You came in second, I came in first. Guess that's what they call natural selection.
Guess that's what they call a rehearsal.
The girls, meanwhile, just make fun of him.
I wonder what she sees in me. It's probably the quiet good looks coupled with a certain smoky magnetism. Miss French, you two are probably a little too young to understand what an older woman would say in a younger man.
Oh, I understand.
Good.
A younger man is too dumb to wonder why an older woman can't find someone her own age and too desperate to care about the surgical improvements.
What surgical improvements?
Well, he is young and so terribly innocent.
As we see, no one thinks there's anything morally wrong here. The characters still have the mindset of the rock and roll period. The underlying assumption is that the viewers, too, have this mindset, and we are rooting for Xander to defeat Blaine and bag the teacher. But the show, in its metaphorical way, is about to teach us a lesson. Buffy, meanwhile, has a couple of threads of her own going on. First, she is asked to stay after class by her biology teacher, Dr. Gregory, whom we already met in the previous episode. Are we going to see another case of a teacher coming on to a student? Nah, Gregory is the kind of teacher we all wish we could have.
Principal Flutie showed me your permanent record.
Well, that fire, there was major extenuating circumstances. Actually, it's kind of funny.
I can't wait to see what you're going to do here.
Destructo girl. It's me.
But I suspect it's going to be great.
You mean great in a bad way?
You have a first-rate mind and you can think on your feet. Imagine what you could accomplish if you actually did the
homework thing.
The homework thing. I understand you probably have a good excuse for not doing it. Amazingly enough, I don't care. I know you can excel in this class, and so I expect no less. Is that clear?
Yeah. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. Be smart. And please don't listen to the principal or anyone else's negative opinion about you. Let's make them eat that permanent record. What do you say?
Okay. Thanks.
This is something that is rarely acknowledged by characters on the show. Buffy is actually really smart. Willow is not the only brainy girl in the mix. Gregory makes her believe in herself, and we shall see the results of that later on. But he is also the first victim to a running theme in the show, in which whenever Buffy meets someone who seems to be good for her, they immediately get killed. Gregory's head gets bitten off right after this conversation, making way for the substitute teacher to take over. When his body is found, Buffy is devastated, and we can see that she's been crying. It shows how much she needs someone like that, someone who believes in her ability to be good. Giles, at this stage, does not provide it. Another thing going on in her life is the return of Angel, for the first time since the pilot. And this is the first episode when we realize that there are sparks flying between them. They don't acknowledge it yet, though. For now, they act like it is strictly professional. He warns her about a vampire with a metal, fork-like claw, and Giles speculates that it is the vampire he read about, that had his hand cut off by the Master. From that we learn that the Master is still around, and Giles is studying him. As Buffy hunts the claw guy, she sees him being afraid of Miss French, and this puts her on the trail of discovering that she isn't human. By now, we have already figured out that Natalie French is a praying mantis in human form, and she has her raptorial legs hooked into Xander. Buffy, doing the homework thing, figures it out as well. She tries to warn Xander, but the praying mantis already made him feel like he is a rock star, so he thinks all girls want him, and Buffy is just acting out of jealousy. He accepts Miss French's invitation to come to her house, gets trapped in her lair, and the clock is ticking on our heroes to save him. The show, here, taps into a tried and tested horror trope. human-sized or even larger insects were a favorite of 50s horror B-movies and continued to be a staple in horror.
Who can tell me why? Buffy?
Well, the words bug ugly kind of spring to mind.
This is one reason. Insects look gross to us when you magnify their features, and actually magnifying them creates a hideous monster. In 50s horror flicks, they became magnified due to human science, and served as metaphors for the fear of science that started to set in after the horrors of World War II. But Buffy takes it in another direction. The main horror element that is played upon here is the sheer brutality of the insect kingdom, which we rarely find in other types of animals, and the praying mantis is a good example. During sex, the female mantis, that is bigger than the male, bites his head off and then feeds on him. He provides the energy she needs to lay her eggs, pays with his life for the privilege of becoming a father. This is the type of monster we are dealing with here. Giles classifies her with those monsters, like sirens, who take female form in order to seduce men. The she-mantis, as he calls her, seduces specifically human virgins, and then does to them what the mantis does, although it's even worse, because she rapes her male victims, and then bites their head off. This, the show is telling us in its metaphoric way, is what a teacher who has sex with her high school pupils is. Not the most awesome thing that can happen to you, but a predator and a rapist. When she is revealed in her true form, she is bug ugly indeed. The mantis suit has been borrowed from the sci-fi show Babylon 5, where it was one of the aliens. Babylon 5 was another show, like Buffy, that changed the face of television, offering a story that spanned over its entire 5 seasons. And it, too, was done on a relatively low budget. Very few people at the time thought that television could be an art form, and there was very little spent on production value. I mean, how poor was the Buffy production team that its costumes had to be borrowed second-hand from another rinky-dink production set? But this is what makes these 90s shows extra beautiful in my eyes. The fact that they had to use creativity to find solutions, and allow showrunners like J. Michael Straczynski and Joss Whedon to create such great art with a shoestring budget. In so doing, they changed our perception of what could be done with the virginal medium of television, and helped bring the big money in. Speaking of virginal, our own virgin Xander seems to be heading towards beheading, and worse. But Buffy proves Dr. Gregory right, taking control over the situation and employing her brains.
See if you can get her address off the substitute rolls. And you need to record bat sonar and fast.
Bat sonar, right. What?
Bats eat them. A mantis hears sonar, its entire nervous system goes kaplooey.
Where am I going to find
In the vid library. There are no books, but it's dark and musty. You'll feel right at home. Go!
They find Miss French's address and get to her house.
What now exactly? We can't just kick the door down.
Yeah, that would be wrong.
Hello, dear. I thought I heard...
Oh my god, it's her! She's back! There's no stopping this woman. That's actually not the same actress, and also the wrong woman. Turns out this is the real Natalie French, and the she-mantis stole her identity. Looks like it's all over for Xander, but Buffy, again, proves that Dr. Gregory was right when he said that she can think on her feet. She hunts down the claw guy, uses him to find the house, and we get to the final showdown.
Remember Dr. Gregory? He scarfed his head. Yeah, well, he taught me. You do your homework, you learn stuff. Like what happens to your nervous system when you hear this.
Extremely important to file, not simply alphabetically.
Giles!
It's the wrong side.
Ah yes, the tape recorder, and the cassette player. Remember those? A tape had 2 sides, and you had to rewind it to get to the start. But once you got them to the right spot, they would play the wonderful music of the rock and roll period. A metaphor, if you will, for what it feels like watching these low-tech 90s TV shows. Giles does, eventually, find the right spot, and Buffy gets to avenge Dr. Gregory. She saves not just Xander, but also Blaine, who, it turns out, is also a virgin. Xander learns that a lot of the male bragging about sex is nothing more than hot air, and he doesn't have to feel like a loser. In the battle with the jock Blaine, he actually emerges as the winner.
Blaine, shut up.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's really sweet. But certainly nothing I'll ever bring up again.
Yeah, nowadays there are boys who openly admit they can't get laid, and even form online groups. But in the rock and roll period, no one would admit it, and would come at you with a machete if you dared suggest it. So, when did the paradigm shift? When did sex between a teacher and her students start to be regarded in a negative light? Well, the cause for the paradigm shift was the fall of youth culture, which we discussed in the previous video. In the cyber period, you don't think your life ends at 25, so it is not so important to cram all of life's experiences into the few years of youth, and you think more about remaining healthy for all the years you'll have to spend living as an adult. In the transitional phase to the cyber period, then, teenage sex started to be viewed differently. The watershed moment occurred in 2002, when the sexual abuse committed by Catholic priests against underage parishioners was exposed, resulting in a massive scandal. When such things happened in liberal enclaves, the liberal media would usually play down, but this was the church, and the press had a field day. The 2015 movie Spotlight, about the journalists who broke the story, shows how they gradually come to realize the horror that the victims live in, until they get to the point when they can't understand how everyone around them, even though many knew, could remain indifferent to it. Until they get to the moment when they realize that they, too, knew about it, but repressed it. In the rock and roll period, as we said, sex was seen as the great liberator, and people didn't want to know about its darker sides. After that scandal, the field was opened for people to come forward and testify to the long-term negative effects that having sex with adults, while being minors, had on them. It started to be portrayed in a bad light, especially when the adult had authority over the youth, and the mindset changed. But Buffy was there first, with this 1997 episode that already teaches our heroes that it is wrong for underage kids to enter romantic relationships with adults. Wrong, wrong, wrong. You should never ever... Oh.
Loving you is wrong. I don't wanna be right. If being right means being without you, I'd rather live a wrongdoing life. Your mama and daddy say it's a shame, it's a downright disgrace.